I think it's commonly, I grew up going, okay, between, 8 and 12 reps, do 3 sets one week, 4 sets the next week, 5 sets, and that was kind of it. That's what we knew. Is that accurate?
No, it's a lot more complex than that. And when you say, is it accurate, is that going to make gains for you? Yeah, I mean, it will. Is that going to maximize gains? No, probably not. So what we found, there's the old hypertrophy rep range and bodybuilding style workout, much of what we thought has been challenged. So number one, well, some of it has been actually supported now by data, like the higher volumes. We actually published a meta-analysis earlier this year showing a clear, what's called a dose-response relationship. So as the dose goes up of volume, so does the hypertrophy.
So the more reps you can get in, the more sets you can get in for the week, the more you're going to gain.
Well, up to a certain point. So there's a threshold. It's not, the dose response is not forever. So, but what we showed was that 4 sets or less per week got around 5% muscle gains over the course of the study. 5 to 9 sets per week per muscle, this is a per muscle per week, got about 7%, and then when you went up to 10 plus, it was around 10% gain. So roughly double the gains at 10 plus sets per week versus 4 or less sets per muscle per week. So there's a clear dose-response relationship. There is also, it's clear that won't keep going up in a stepwise linear fashion like that.
I figured that out. I've been training for 20 years.
You're smaller now than you've ever been.
But so at some point that's going to level off. We were not able to establish anything above 10. So could it be 15? We don't know.
Yeah.
Could 10 be the threshold? Could more be the threshold? But at some point it's going to level off. And at some point, certainly there'll be an overtraining response where you just keep training. If you're training, if you spend 8 hours in the gym every day, we know that there's going to be an overtraining response. Andy's done some work on that.
Yep.
So within that, it gives me the hypothesis that there's a benefit towards pushing the body towards an overreaching without delving into overtraining, and that would be periodizing volume over time, where you're doing graded increases. Let's say doing 8 sets per week, or let's say 10, whatever, 8 sets per week 1 month, and going up to 12 and 15, something like that. And it would be different for everyone. These are averages, so some people might need less, some people might need more. I can't give an exact number, but where you're actually just looking on an individual basis to push that volume response over time.
So that's volume. What about reps per set?
Reps per set, it used to be thought there was that hypertrophy range of 8 to 12, clearly debunked, in the sense on a whole muscle level, at least clearly debunked. We have hard data now, and we have a meta-analysis and review showing really no differences between 65% and above of intensity of percent 1RM versus 60% and below. So your lightweights, 20 to 30 reps versus your 8 to 12 reps versus your 3 to 5 reps, zero difference. As long as you have roughly, as long as you hit a volume threshold, you're going to get roughly equal gains on a whole muscle level. There is some evidence. I wanted to hopefully one day get with Andy and look at a fiber type response, but there is some evidence, particularly out of Russia. They now have, I think, 5 studies that I've seen showing that the higher reps seem to target hypertrophy in the type 1 fibers, and that the moderate to lower reps seem to target hypertrophy in the type 2
What is the range of higher reps? What qualifies as a higher rep range?
50% and below. So you're talking like 20 reps, over 15, 20 reps.
Gotcha.
So for this conversation, is it important to point out that we're talking about hypertrophy specifically, gaining muscle mass specifically?
That's
we're not
correct.
talking about strength as well.
And I will qualify that for strength, there is also a clear benefit to doing heavier loads.
Yeah, so in those same studies, they all got equally the same gains in muscle mass, but the 3 to 5 rep ranges got way stronger than the set to 20.
And even the 8 to 10 reps got substantially stronger than the 20 to 30 reps. And our meta-analysis, which was, now it's the largest meta-analysis, it's again in review, hopefully will be published soon, but we had 21 studies, and there was a clear difference in strength. There was significant and marked difference in dynamic strength.
Yeah.
If this sounds familiar, this is exactly what we talked about on episode 234.
243?
243 or something like that.
The 3 mechanisms of hypertrophy?
Yeah, that I was on, and I opened up that show saying, like, I'm stealing all this stuff from Brad Schoenfeld. Like, hopefully one day we'll get him on. Well, here he is.
Today's the day.
So I'm glad I didn't screw too much of that up, because I think that's what I said in that episode before. But so that was total volume reps.
And we got rest intervals, so we actually now have shown that somewhat longer rest. It used to be thought resting shorter because it would elevate hormonal levels, like your acute anabolic hormonal response, which really has not been shown. If anything, we don't think it has, well, certainly there's no evidence it has a substantial effect, and probably it has minimal to no effect.
What you're saying there is the post-exercise induced bump in testosterone.
That's correct, not chronic.
Doesn't actually lead to any more growth.
That's correct.
Right.
So we're not talking, it doesn't mean that testosterone levels, which obviously are important on a chronic basis, but that this spike basically after a workout, when you do a moderate to higher reps, it's been shown to spike hormonal levels. Really there is little evidence that that is a significant driver of hypertrophy. And thus, we actually have shown that longer, we showed that 3 minutes rest versus 1 minute's rest had greater effects on muscle growth with the longer rest interval. Now that said, we also have made a systematic review that was published showing that the effects seem to be specific to more trained subjects, and that with untrained subjects they respond to almost anything, and that it has less of an effect. Again, these are things that need to be teased out more, but bottom line is you don't need to do quick workouts. Look, there's also the trade-off. Everything is cost-benefit. Some people don't want to be in the gym longer. So
I was gonna say, I like quick workouts.
This is right.
Yeah.
So how much of that? So can there be a trade-off? It's not substantial. It doesn't mean you're going to not get gains. It's just that it does attenuate. If you're looking to maximize gains, we've kind of pinned 2 minutes as a good rest interval for compound movements, for like squats, rows, presses. We also do think, and this is still needs to be, we need more evidence, but that doing like bicep curls, your single joint movements, probably you can get away with resting shorter without detriment. Because you don't see, the real issue seems to be a drop off in volume load. That when you do a squat and then you rest 60 seconds, your squat, the number of reps you could do is like halved. So if you did 12 reps, you're down to like 6 or 7. Whereas if you do a bicep curl, 12 reps, you might be down to 11. And that's not the loss of reps, doesn't seem to have compromised gains to that effect.
So is that a good way to test to see, without actually timing your rest interval, to see if you had a full recovery? Can you actually get back to almost the same number of reps you did the
or
first
close
set?
to it? Yeah. If you're slightly off, it probably is not going to. Let's say you go from 12 reps to 11, the reduction, 10 even, the reduction in volume probably isn't going to have much of an effect, assuming you are doing a sufficient volume to start with. And by the way, the other thing you could say is we equated volume on these. If you did an extra set by resting shorter, could that then make up for it?
Yeah.
Those are all things that we don't know, and these are limitations to research.
Well, that's actually something you mention all the time, is one of the things you should be doing with all this in mind is having a variety in your training.
Correct.
You should do not just, I'm going to do 3 sets per body part, so I get 10 sets per weekend of the same exercise. Like, this is not a good approach, maybe for a month.
Correct.
But then eventually we need to have a lot of variety, so this is when a lot of the stuff plays in.
And to finish up the variety, what's pretty clear is
Nice
that
segue.
To,
That was
yes,
good, like a pro.
to maximize gains, you should have at least some rotation of exercises that are targeting different areas of the muscle. So if you keep doing let's say a flat chest press, well, it's targeting the same portion of the chest. The chest is, first of all, 2 heads, as a clavicular and a sternal head. And even with that, there's differences in how the fibers are, the direction of the fibers, which by changing around from a decline to an incline, perhaps a fly, it hits the muscle differently. It provides a novelty to a stimulus. Doesn't mean you need to be doing muscle confusion, a P90X workout.
Right.
I've got a new system. It's for fat confusion, though.
Right. So you rotate different foods in, and that's the
Definitely.
fat cells don't understand the difference between
They have
cheesecake
no
and
idea.
tiramisu.
They have no
I
idea.
like that. Cheesecake one day, tiramisu the next, and the fat cells just get.
They're all fucked up.
I like that, yeah.
They don't know where to go, so we just shit them out.
Oh,
I smell a new book. I smell a bestseller.
and the final, there's other variables we can talk about, but the final variable that seems to be of high importance is frequency. How often should you train frequency of muscles? And what the literature shows, and we published a meta-analysis on this, is that 2 days a week is better than 1 day a week per muscle group. Not training total. It doesn't mean training 1 day versus 2 days. It means that hitting your muscles a minimum of twice a week seems to have a better effect than the typical bro split where you're trying for chest 1 day and shoulders the next.
Now, I remember when you published that, I think this may be wrong, but there was a survey done of high-level bodybuilders who actually still do the normal split, right?
Yeah.
Like biceps today. And I think one of your conclusions was even though these guys are the best at it, that doesn't necessarily mean they maybe know what's optimal.
Correct.
Especially when you consider the extra advantages they have over the general person. So if even you're trying to grow as much muscle mass as possible, it's better to, instead of just crushing the muscle once a week, doing half the workout and splitting it up over 2 days, because you equated volume in those studies,
That's
right?
correct.
Yeah.
And one thing you also have to consider, though, with the typical bro who might be working out 6 days a week, if they're doing chest one day and then they're doing, let's say, shoulders another, well, the triceps are getting work.
Yeah.
They might be actually working their triceps. Then they have an arm day. They're working their triceps 3 days a week, really.
Right.
So you have to consider the frequency aspect there. But legs are not getting hit with ancillary exercises. So if you're just doing your legs once, you might want, if you want to work out with a bro split and factor in that aspect, consider the legs are not getting the ancillary workouts.
You should never be doing legs only once.
That's correct.
Like ever.
True.